Good afternoon, everyone. I'll introduce myself. I'm Kevin Dancer. I was in your guys' shoes last year as a MEng cohort member. I'm now working for PwC in their advisory consultant practice. And I'm here today to give you guys some information about consulting, about the case interview, about interviews in general. So looking forward to giving that to you guys. And I want you guys to know, if you guys have any questions, you know, I don't think you'd have any right now, but if you have any right now, I'll take them as well. But any questions throughout the process, throughout the presentation, please just let me know, raise your hand. I know this stuff can sometimes be over the top or it could be a little confusing. So throughout this, just please let me know, raise your hand. I'll be happy to call on you and we can get a conversation that way. Because I really want to make this about you guys. You guys come in with a lot of questions. I'm sure this is a very ambiguous process that you're going in now. So let me know any way that I can help. It would be great. So starting off, sorry about that. Okay, so the first thing in consulting interviews that you're going to come up with is the behavioral interview, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about. And it's usually the first stage with most companies. I know some consulting firms, though, do it in the second interview. One specifically is Bain. I think they do 2 back-to-back case interviews and then the behavioral interview. But there's a couple of things you really have to know and make sure that you demonstrate out in the behavioral interview, especially for consulting firms, that I want to help you guys out on today. The first one is know yourself. Make sure you know it back and forth. Know your strengths and know your weaknesses. They're going to ask you, hey, what do you think you're good at? What do you think something that you struggle with? And if it looks like you're fabricating some of these answers, trust me, they'll know and they'll figure that out as well. These people have been through a lot of interviews. They've seen a bunch of different people do it, so they can tell when, you may be thinking, okay, tell me about yourself, and then all of a sudden you look over to the side. That's not portraying that confidence in yourself to them. One thing that I like to do for these behavioral interviews was rehearsing my story. You know certain questions are going to come up in this behavioral interview process. Like I said, one's going to be, tell me about yourself. One's going to be, okay, give me some strengths. Others could be, give me a time where you influenced or persuaded a group. Goals that you set for yourself. These questions you know are going to come on this interview. Make sure you practice them. I always wrote it, like in the topic next, I always wrote out my answers. I made sure I was going to spend a page. I was going to spend a couple hours before the interview I had the next day or in the morning. I was going to write out my answer just so I know I could crystallize it and have it perfect. Definitely don't memorize the answers because they can tell that too. Nobody wants you to be a robot up there repeating something just simply verbatim. But it's already a step that you guys know. You guys can look at Glassdoor to find questions that are going to be out there. I always did that, relevant questions for particular companies. And one of the best resources you guys have is your cohort yourself. Ask, hey, have you guys encountered any difficult questions in the behavioral interview? Maybe okay, how would you approach this question? What do you think I was struggling with, how I persuaded a group, or a time where I had a challenge with a manager? These are things you could really ask each other, because to be honest with you, the best resource you guys have is each other at this point. And lastly is know your resume. That's one of the biggest things. Your resume is fair game. They've got it from you. You always set it in with your application. They're going to look down through it all throughout. So make sure you know that through and through. Make sure you know stories for it. I would always, once again, write down 2 or 3 stories I had for each job position, each internship position. Athletic, extracurricular. Those are things they're really going to ask you on. And so if you have a couple of stories, positive and also negative to it as well, those are things that are really going to stand out for you and are helpful to know. So make sure you know your resume, because if you don't know your resume and they ask you a question and you're stuttering on it, or you may say like, oh, hey, yeah, I can speak French, and then one of the interviewers just happens by chance to know a little French, you guys are going to be in a rough time there. So don't fabricate too much on the resume either. But you guys are impressive people. You go to UC Berkeley, you got into the MEng program, so you have a lot of skills that you have. Recognition. What consulting firms are looking for in a good candidate? A couple of things that they are is they want someone that's confident, they want it comfortable, and good communication skills. Confidence is one of the biggest things that they're looking for, because they want to see, okay, how can this person handle stress, and how can they look in front of a client. Consulting, you're going to be in a lot of client-facing situations and dealing with clients all the time. So they want to see, okay, can this person handle themselves? Do I always have to be looking over their shoulders? Do I always have to be holding their hands? In the beginning, of course, it's going to happen. But as you go through the process, you start getting more experience in it. Your confidence will build as well. You'll build up your communication skills. And that'll really help you out. Communication skills are very, very important. It's one thing I didn't realize when I was in your shoes. I thought, communication, yeah, all you got to do is talk. It's a good time. It's fun. You're working with a couple of coworkers. But it's extremely important to communicate with the people above you, the people below you, and the people that you're working with. Make it known what their expectations, what your superior's expectations are of yourself, and make it known what you're expecting to do on certain projects. What your role is on this project, because that's extremely valuable. Also, things that they're looking for is leadership ability and initiative. Once again, you guys are UC Berkeley students in the Masters of Engineering program. I'm sure you've had a ton of leadership abilities. I'm sure you've had opportunities to show initiative. But these are things you really want to highlight out, not just only in your resume and your cover letters, but also in the interview as well. They're very important to know, because this is what companies are looking for. Once you start working out on your own, it's not so much you have a teacher and you have problem sets, and you have tests that you're working towards. You're more on your own. So you have to go out and search for projects that you want to be involved in. You have to go out and talk to managers, directors, and say, okay, what are you working on? That's something I'm interested in. I've got skills X, Y, and Z. That's why I think I can provide value to the project or the engagement that you're on. And so these things, these initiative skills are very important. It's something that you definitely have to highlight. Not just so much in the recruiting process, but also when you get into the consulting world as well. A huge thing that they're looking for is team players. You're constantly working on projects. So on a project, you're never going to be working on your own. The only time you're working on your own is when you're doing personal development, maybe recruiting like I'm doing right now. But every single time you're working on engagement, working with a client, working on a project, you're going to be working with teams. So the team dynamic and how you work with teams is extremely important. You guys have a great opportunity for it this year with the Capstone project. You're definitely going to hit some bumps working with some team members. I thought, I was always a very gregarious guy. I could always get together and have good team dynamics. But yeah, I hit a couple speed bumps. We had some times where we were neck and neck with each other. But it's how you get through these times and how you better yourself in these team situations is how you're going to be better for the consulting world and working better on these team projects. And the last thing is, one thing that really stands out and someone that told me is on the math skills, on the fundamental math, like the mental math skills, when they ask you, okay, certain percentages, they'll throw out some numbers for you. They may throw this out in the beginning, in the behavioral interview. Make sure you brush up on those. You guys are engineers. If you slip up on the math, something that's your strong point and which you should really rely upon, it's going to look a little, I don't want to say shady, but it's not going to look great if you don't have your math skills down. So even if it means brushing up on, you can find websites all over that have great resources to brush up on this, but make sure you have the math skills down. It's very important. And last thing for it is to put in your research. When you're going into these behavioral interviews, companies want to see, okay, why are you interested in PwC? Or for my case, PwC. But why are you interested in company X, Y, and Z? That's always going to be a question that's asked in your interview. And there's certain things you can do to impress the interviewer for this. And it's attend career fairs, attend info sessions. I was talking to some of you guys earlier. It seems like career fairs are going on all throughout this week. Make sure you go to those, talk to people, learn more about the company. That can help you out so much. Because you want to see, okay, what kind of culture does this company have? What's their kind of environment? Who are the people that I'm going to be working with? What kind of attitude do they like? Do they like to work hard, play hard? Is it they like people just to kind of put their head down and just work? It's a more social, team-oriented type of company? So these are things you can really find out in the info session. These are things you can highlight then in your cover letter, maybe emphasize in your resume. Definitely bring out in the interview process. Other things is scour the company's website. You can find so much out from it. You can find a lot about the culture. And that's what companies, surprisingly enough, are very concerned and very interested in. They want their recruits, they want their potential employees to fit into the company culture. It's something that they stand behind. It's their brand. And so they don't want people who aren't necessarily going to fit in to the rest of the people in the company. They're not going to be successful. It's not conducive to their advancement. So scour the company's website, know what they're about. Know what their morals are, know what their standards are. Another one is talk to alumni or graduates that are working at the company. I mean, there's a huge amount of us working in consulting firms. I know friends that are working at PwC like myself, but also EY, the Deloittes, the McKinseys, the Bains. Reach out to these people, ask them. Ask them to grab coffee, ask them for a phone call. I'm sure they can spare 15 minutes of their time to talk with you guys, and they'd love to as well. And check the news as well. Make sure you guys are reading up on that. Check for news pressings that you can find out about the company. There's a great resource that I like to use. It's called The Skim. It gives you updated news reports. I also read the Wall Street Journal. I'm always trying to update, advance my business acumen in terms of those, because that's what consulting firms are really interested in. Now, the case interview. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about it, and it's obviously very important for consulting interviews. As you guys know, it's usually a hypothetical business situation, a business problem, dilemma, where you're trying to overcome, could be some inefficiency that the company has, maybe some new product that they want to launch in the market. But it's always going to be straining yourself to see, interviewers are going to see, okay, what's his business acumen? How does he handle pressure? Can he come up, sort through a bunch of information, a bunch of data, and come up with the proper answer? And so there's really, when it boils down to it, there's 4 key case scenarios. First one's profit loss, where you're looking, okay, we want to look at the margins of certain business situations. You break it down, cost, revenues, and then you segment it out there. The important thing though to know is, when you're breaking it down into profits and loss, you're looking ultimately for profits, and as I mentioned, you have your revenues and costs. But as you break those down, you want to be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. And that's important to know, because you want to exhaust through all options that are possible, but you also don't want to be combining certain things, whether it be in the revenue, whether it be in cost as well. Now the next one is entering a new market. Companies are always looking to expand and go into new areas, new opportunities. Entering a new market is very important. And the things you have to know is, you have to understand the company, the competition that's out there, the customer that's there, and the costs that are associated. Understanding those 4 C's, as they like to call it, is very important for going into a new market. Because you want to see where the company is going to fit in, how they can expand in this market. Are they going to succeed in it? So those are 4 important things to understand with it. The next one is pricing. They could have new products that they're going into. They could be taking a huge loss on certain products that they have, or certain services that they have. And so they want to look, okay, where does our pricing stand? Does it stand, relative to our competitors? Does it stand relative to, market value? And so these are things that you have to understand in terms of a pricing standpoint. And the last one is growth and increasing sales. That's big for companies are always going to want to increase their revenue. And so sometimes they may want to take on new companies inside of them, mergers, as it says up here, mergers and acquisitions. So they're looking, okay, will, now acquiring company X, Y, and Z help out with synergies? Will it help out with, new channel distributions? Will it help out with new market segmentation? These are all things you really should be considering in terms of growth and increase in sales. Because these are things that companies are always worried about. They're always worried about, okay, how can we increase our revenue? How can we lower costs? And I really recommend looking at, there's a good book out there for the case interview. It's called Case in Point. It's got great information about it. I strongly recommend reading through it cover to cover, because it'll give you in-depth not only how to handle behavioral, but also how to handle the case interview for consulting interviews, which is extremely helpful, because it'll tell you how to act, but it'll also tell you how to approach it in terms of breaking the problem down, which I'm going to go into actually next, I believe, with consulting in the case interview. As I mentioned before, some of the things that they're looking to test your analytical ability. That's one of the main things. Do you have a question on that?
Yeah, can you repeat that book on the name again?
Yeah, it's called Case in Point. And I forget the author, but I think there's like 8 editions out there. To be honest, you can just Google it, Case in Point, PDF, you can find it online. It's out there, it's relatively easy. Ask some of your colleagues as well, I'm sure they have access to it. I think there's also one in the Career Center. They may have one there as well. But going back to it, the case interview, what interviews are looking for is a lot of analytical skills. Now you guys are obviously very analytical, you're engineers, you know how to take a problem, figure out, okay, what's most important from it, what do I need to derive out of it, and what do I need to kind of suggest to the person to solve the business solution. So use those analytical skills. That's clearly one of your guys' strengths. Apply that to this interview. They're also going to test your ability to think logically and organized. That's one of the huge things. They want to see how organized you are thinking and dealing with these business problems. You know, if you can have great analytical skills, but if you can't organize your thoughts, if you're just all over the place, talking to them one time about revenue, but then you're also talking about, you know, market distribution, market segmentation, they're going to be, why is this person going from one area to the other? And it's difficult at times for engineers because we're kind of rewarded for thinking that way at times. You know, I like to call it just brainstorming, going all over the place. It's been helpful in my engineering ideation classes. But in consulting, they really want to see, okay, how structured is this person? Can they correctly and properly follow a logical flow of information, a logical thought process? That's something that you really want to practice on and really stress in the interview. Next one is to observe your thought process. Now, a lot of the times you'll be in this case interview, you'll hear the potential case, you'll hear the case, and you'll be writing a bunch of notes down. And that's good. You want to be taking notes, but you also want it to be a conversation with the interviewer. You want it to be a back and forth. If it's just a one-way street, this guy's spewing information at you, that's not going to be helpful. You want to talk to them because you want to show them your thought process, what you're thinking about. Yeah, it may be completely wrong, but at least they can understand, okay, where is this person going down? What are they thinking about? Constantly have communication with the interviewer. It's important for them to know because then they'll be able to hear your thought process. And a lot of times you may not get the proper solution, but if they can understand, okay, how is this person approaching it? How is he going down? That'll be extremely helpful. The next is, as I mentioned before, is to test your kind of poise when dealing with a ton of information. I remember one business case I was working with. It was a company called Berkeley. I don't know if they've been here on campus, but they gave us an hour, and they gave us, I think, like 100 pages worth of information, and it had, like a bunch of different accounting statements, financial statements, like profit loss, statement of cash flows, the balance statement. But then they also gave us, a bunch of emails, text messages, and then they had sales metrics. And I was just like, how am I supposed to, organize this and get all this together in an hour's time? And me personally, I was a little lost by it all. It went all over my head. And it's one of the things that they really stress and emphasize in the interview. They want to see, okay, can this person take all this information, this large set of it, figure out what's the most important, what's the pertinent information out of it, come up with a solution, and then display that solution, provide that solution to the client, to the end user. It's what's very important, and it's also very difficult. So I strongly recommend practicing with that. And once again, kind of overlying scheme is to assess your poise and self-confidence. Confidence is one of the biggest things. And also confidence is one of those things where you can fake it till you make it. Put a smile on, speak loudly, look them straight in the eyes. It's very, very important. But with whatever answer, whatever solution you come up with in the case interview, make sure you stand by it. There could be times where they ask, I don't know if that's the right one. And if you have proper evidence, you have a proper argument for it, stick by that. They look at times if you come up with a solution, they challenge it, they argue it, and then you just back down and kind of accept their suggestion immediately. That's not going to stand well in consulting interviews. They want to see that you came up with your solution and you trust your solution. You're very confident in it. Confidence is a huge thing about it, and just in life in general. And lastly, how to approach the interview is there's a pretty regimented script, which is in Case in Point, which I really, like I said, I recommend you guys look at because it's very important to look at this. But you want to first listen to the question. Listen to it all, because there could be multiple parts of the question and you may not fully understand it. And next, what you want to do is you want to take notes. So while you're hearing this question, take notes. Take notes about everything. It's really important because they're going to spew a lot at you. And there's nothing wrong with taking notes on it and then asking about certain, clarifying questions that you may need or certain things that you didn't catch. Next thing you want to do is you want to summarize the question. They're going to give you a bunch of information. You want to make sure you and the interviewer are on the same page. So you want to say, okay, so from what I understand, The company's lost profits in the last 2 years, and they're also looking at regaining some of their market share. Is this what the client is looking for? Always make sure you take in all that information, process it, and then give it back out to the interviewer to make sure you guys are on the same page. Because if you're doing a case and you realize halfway through that you guys are on completely different pages, you're not even answering the question that they want solved, it's going to be a hard time. You're probably actually going to get the boot out of the interview. Next thing is to verify the objective, which is similar. Make sure you know what you're trying to solve. Ask clarifying questions, like I said. Organize your answer. Now, there's certain frameworks that come up that you guys are probably interested in. You can definitely search these up online. As I mentioned, there's the profit loss framework. There's entering a new market. There's pricing frameworks. These are great things to look up online, but I really don't want to stress them too much because I remember in my process, being an engineer, I kind of use those as a crutch. I use them as a backbone. Something that whenever I'd struggle, may not know how to approach the problem, approach the case, I kind of rely on those, and I rely on them very heavy. I remember specifically, I was interviewing with A.T. Kearney, and they gave me just a standard case. It was involved in, I think, like retail, and they wanted to look at segmentation distributions. Certain areas of the country were struggling compared to others. And for some reason that day, it wasn't working out for me. So I relied heavily on the profit loss framework. And at the end of the day, it crushed me because I couldn't get anywhere. All I did was, profit, revenue equals loss. Let's break it down. Revenues is sales times, cost per sale, losses, or costs are, you have your fixed, you have your variable costs. And I just kept going down. But at the end of the day, I couldn't find a solution. I couldn't come up with a solution. And the woman called me later on that night telling me, unfortunately, that I didn't get the second round interview. But she said, you rely too heavily on the frameworks. So that's why I'm hesitant to tell you guys, study these frameworks, make sure you know them like thick and thin, know them throughout. Because they're good to have in the beginning. They're a good way to set up the problem. But don't use them all throughout the entire case. Because you can get really bogged down in it. You can just solely be concentrated and focused on it. And what consultants want to see is how you can think outside of these frameworks. Like I said, they're a great setup, but they want to see, okay, what's his creativity? What's he thinking about? How could certain solutions, certain things be changed or processes be looked at? They really want to test, like I said before, your analytical skills, because those are your strong suits, especially coming as engineers. So make sure you know the frameworks, and there's other ones as well. The Porter's Five Forces, there's the BCG matrix. There's a lot out there. Know, the basic four that I mentioned: the profit loss, entering a new market, pricing, increasing sales, and increasing growth. But don't rely on them too heavily. Just make sure you can set up the case with them. And as you go down, you really want to manage your time. It's something that is actually very challenging, because sometimes you may only have 30 minutes to do these case interviews, and there's a lot of information, as I mentioned, to throw at you. Manage your time. Understand your expectations from it. You're not supposed to come up with a solution that's going to change the entire company. You're supposed to give suggestions. You're supposed to give certain things from your beliefs or your knowledge that you think will help the company out. So just understand that. You're not here to change, rerun their entire operations program. Just remember, okay, there's certain situations, certain things, certain changes that need to be made, and suggest those. Next is, as I mentioned, work the numbers. Consultants love dealing with numbers. It's something that they definitely always try to put in and implement into their cases, because companies like to see that. They like to see, okay, with this new distribution channel that we're going into, we could increase sales by 25%. Always make sure you can find some way to spin in numbers, because that's definitely what they think in. They think in percentages as well. They want to see, okay, can we increase revenue by some certain percentage? Can we decrease costs by some certain percentage? They love working with numbers, so make sure you always highlight that. And be coachable as well, be creative. As I was mentioning before, your analytical skills are very important. Make sure you put your own spin on it. Make sure, it's a great way to stand out in these things. They're going to hear it, like I said before. They've been through a lot of interviews. Make sure you can stand out, and that's through your creativity. You guys are engineers. You have creative mindsets. You're used to thinking. You're used to the ideation process. So definitely use that as a skill, and be coachable as well. They'll definitely give you some feedback. It may be within the case, it may be afterwards. but take that feedback and use it. Don't just think, oh, that person was wrong, I don't know what they were talking about. Being able to be coached is a huge thing that you're going to realize when working is very, very valuable. They're going to give you great feedback. Make sure you take it. Make sure you implement it in your own life. And make sure you make those changes. And last, bring closure and a strong answer. Like I said before, be confident. Always mention your solution, mention your answer, and then give some reasons why you believe. Give the evidence. They've given you a ton of information. You've deciphered through what's pertinent out of that information. Make sure you use that evidence to why your claim, your solution is useful, is helpful. Because that's what they're going to care about at the end of the day. Now, I ended a little shortly. I'm curious if you guys have any questions.